think they were after the children.
For what purpose?
To kill them.
Someone there? Who is it?
Look.
No, it seemed to swoop down at you deliberately.
These birds attacked.
Why are they doing this? They said when you got here the whole thing started. What are you? Where did you come from? I think you're the cause of all this. I think you're evil! Evil!
The Birds is coming. That's what she said. Welcome to the Confessions of a Not So Dangerous Mind podcast. I'd like to thank you all for spending some of this Sunday evening here with me in New York. But once again, we're going to skip past all that promotional jazz and get right to the guts of the episode. Well, my little tease of The Birds is coming, that's what Alfred Hitchcock, in his devilish way, that's how he helped to promote the film The Birds, using that phrase, and it's a kind of almost sideways wink at the occasional total ridicularity of the English language, where there are phrases that don't really make sense. There are idioms. Well, this doesn't really, why do we say it this way and not that way? Is it supposed to be, if you're saying the birds as a bunch of birds, is it the birds are coming or the birds is coming? But when you're talking about a movie, which is not, even though it's plural, it's not plural, it's singular, Hitchcock, wink, wink, The Birds is coming. The 11th entry in our continuing series of Halloween horror, we're going old school, Alfred Hitchcock's legendary 1963 The Birds. Now, Hitchcock is known as the master of suspense, not the master of horror. And one of his kind of progeny, if you will, Brian De Palma, who I adore, that's the most, the major filmmaker who appeared to take the greatest influence from Alfred Hitchcock. And Brian De Palma was known as the master of the macabre. There are plenty of masters of horror, but there has never been anyone whose name suited them or they were as known for a particular nickname as Alfred Hitchcock and a master of suspense. But there is an idea, an incorrect one, that Hitchcock made a lot of horror movies, and he didn't. He made two, Psycho and The Birds. And The Birds does not take the form of anything resembling a normal horror film, whereas Psycho very clearly does, was the first modern horror film. When we assess the greatest period in Alfred Hitchcock's career, it's the 5 years during which he made Vertigo, which many consider to be a top 3 greatest film in the history of cinema, period. North by Northwest, his most entertaining film. Psycho, first modern horror film, and there are those that would argue that Psycho is Hitchcock's greatest achievement. And The Birds. The Birds had to have been the most difficult production. There are no computers. There is no CGI. All of the special effects had to be done at some form during production. And yeah, there were matte shots, there were glass shots, there's the 1960s era process shots. But it was a brutal production. And the lead actress, Tippi Hedren, Hitchcock didn't exactly treat her that great. I don't want to say that he delighted in torturing her, but he had, or I should say William Friedkin in The Exorcist had a little of that Hitchcock mentality. Stanley Kubrick in The Shining, where he was fucking with Shelley Duvall, or maybe he just wanted to get it perfect. But That's three major filmmakers. Now, I don't think they would get away with that today. I think some of the stuff that Tippy was subjected to, if you transport, and this is not a criticism, this is just a 1 + 1 = 2 reality. You take that into 2024. You don't tell your lead actress, for example, I'm going to throw 100 birds at you when you're not expecting because I want to get a real reaction. I don't think it's going to fly. William Friedkin nearly crippling Ellen Burstyn sure as fuck would have gotten him fired. That might have ended his career. If she had even gone public with it when it happened, if she had said, this motherfucker put me in a freaking hospital. Fuck him. The Exorcist wouldn't have been completed. And in the case of Kubrick and The Shining, there's differing reports about how hard he really did push Shelley Duvall. Was she okay during filming? I feel like Shelley's performance is actually pretty good. She seems overmatched early because Jack is Jack. But the kind of edginess and the nervousness of her performance, the anxiety, Kubrick got what he needed out of her. So, in The Birds, Hitchcock got what he needed out of Tippi Hedren. There are certain scenes where she is a little bit vacant and her line readings they're not great. Whereas her co-star, Rod Taylor, appears fully engaged. And it's been argued that Mitch Brenner, Rod Taylor's character in this film, is the most heroic character in all of Alfred Hitchcock. More so even than what the character of John Gavin plays in Psycho as Marion Crane's boyfriend. Can we say that? Is that really what he is? I guess. I mean, they're kind of doing some illicit stuff there too. But the character of Mitch Brenner doesn't seem like he's going to be particularly heroic. He's got a bit of a playboy reputation. He's living high on the hog. But he rises to the occasion when shit starts to go wrong. And the real horror of The Birds, and I read the short story. It's a phenomenal short story by Daphne du Maurier. There isn't any reason for the birds to do what they do. And I believe it's part of the human condition that we want to at least have some semblance of a reason. Why did this happen? Now, I've read a ton on this movie. There is so much literature on this film. Why do the birds attack and not stop attacking? Well, it's because Melanie does this at that point in the film. No. They just do it. Like the old Nike ad, just do it. They just decide to mass up all different kinds of species, variety of bird. They just decide that they've had enough. Mankind has been killing us for centuries. I don't know. But to me, it adds to the terror in this film. And there are moments, there are setups for payoffs, and there are shots in this film that rival not only anything that Hitchcock ever did, they rival anything that anyone ever did. There is a moment outside of a schoolhouse where I think it's Suzanne Pleshette's character has gone outside to have a cigarette, but I'm not sure. It may be that Tippi Hedren, I think it's that Tippi Hedren is outside waiting for Suzanne Pleshette's character. And the school children are singing a beautiful song. Ba 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 ba, and they keep singing it. It's like an endless loop. Remember how you're on your computer and you're attempting to bypass, or maybe you're trying to put in your password and it keeps telling you to change your password. The password that you just used doesn't work. You change the password and it says you've recently used that password. No, I haven't. And then it feels like you're in this horrifying circular loop and you want to slam your head against the keyboard, you want to break your computer, but that's not really going to do any good. The children keep singing this song. And we see a bird here, a bird there, and another bird, and a few more. And before we know it, there are hundreds of birds where seconds earlier, it was just a young lady sitting outside a school. I don't even have any idea how Hitchcock came up with the idea for that in the first place. But you can imagine him, when he figured out how to stage it, how to frame it, you can imagine him delighting in his own creativity and the fact that he could pull it off and he could make it believable. So there were moments and are moments in the film where the characters were dealing with real birds and not, but they weren't really animatronics, but, you know, like you throw a plastic bird at somebody kind of thing. There were moments where Tippi Hedren was facing real birds. And she was, to some extent, traumatized, not as traumatized as her character of Melanie Daniels is in the world of the film. But it comes through in her performance, and I feel like, for better or worse, her performance sharpens as the movie goes along. Whereas the supporting players, Suzanne Pleshette is home run all the way. She is great in every scene. Whereas at the beginning, or when we first meet her, she's a friend of Mitch, you know, one of those. She's not friends with him. They used to hook up and she's salty. They're not friends. Let's be honest about it. Give me a break. They couldn't really say that in 1963. But from her early scenes where she's worried about Mitch, who she still cares about and presumably still wants for herself, and the way that she deals with Tippi Hedren's Melanie Daniels. But then as the story develops and the interpersonal drama, love triangle, sex triangle, whatever you want to call it, it's not even one of the conversation points after a certain level in the movie. It just becomes about survival or not. The film starts off as if it's a light romantic comedy. If you don't know what you're doing, if you just drop into this and you have no idea who Alfred Hitchcock is, you've never seen a movie with Rod Taylor, you didn't see The Time Machine, the original, which is pretty good. The Guy Pearce remake is also pretty good. I think that they're both okay but flawed. You don't know who Tippi Hedren is? Oh, it's Melanie Griffith's mom. You don't know any of that. The film takes the form, apparently, of some kind of romantic comedy. Now, Hitchcock in Psycho does something similar, or at least in the same ballpark. In Psycho, we have a situation with a character of Marion Crane, played by Janet Leigh, who steals a lot of money, goes on the run because she wants to be with her guy, and with the money, maybe they can run away to Mexico or Fiji or wherever. The music is horror film music, as Bernard Herrmann was one of the masters for sure. But there is nothing in the early portions of that film that says to you as the audience, if you don't know what you're watching, let's say you don't even know the title of the movie is Psycho. There's nothing that says, oh my God, this is going to be a creep fest. Well, right up until the moment in The Birds where Melanie Daniels plays a practical joke on Mitch Brenner, somebody who has one-upped her. He's presented as very intelligent, he's a lawyer, and he's seriously clever. She's come across as if she's angry at him. She's not really angry at him. She has very heavy designs on him, not in a platonic kind of way. Right up until the moment where she inexplicably, a bird kind of lands on her head and pecks at her and opens a cut. Right up until that moment, there's nothing in The Birds to indicate that there is going to be a bird problem. Now, yeah, if you know the title of the movie is The Birds, fine. But it's something that Hitchcock was very canny with, and most filmmakers don't even attempt that. There's misdirection. This is not exactly misdirection. It's simply not hitting you with what the story is right away. Vertigo, for example. We first meet Scotty Ferguson, and he's climbing a rooftop, a sequence of shots, I might add, that was mirrored by the Wachowskis in the first Matrix movie. I got to throw that out there. They almost a dead-on replica from a procedural standpoint as far as the shot making. But when you see a guy in that story, the police officer, Scotty Ferguson, chasing a crook and suddenly gets hit by a vertigo attack, you're not expecting this to be a psychological horror story about a guy who is so guilt-ridden, he kind of loses, no, not kind of, he loses touch with reality. And he begins to take actions where you say, we got to throw a net on this guy. And the fact that it's James Stewart. Oh, shucks, James Stewart. He's a twisted SOB. Well, in The Birds, we have more standard, straightforward, decent people. Jessica Tandy, who later won an Oscar, she's so great in Driving Miss Daisy. I know the film isn't terrific. It's overrated. Yeah, I know. She's great in that movie. And here, she's a lot younger, 25 years prior. She is so solid as Mitch's mom. That's the Rod Taylor character. She comes across like a real person. She doesn't seem like a movie star reciting dialogue. Rod Taylor has his moments where he almost sounds like a stage performer. See, the thing with Tippi, she doesn't come across as if she ever acted in a play. She seems like a film actress first. So that does help. There is a natural quality. It's just that some of her line readings, there's a kind of an airiness to her voice. It's kind of hard to describe. If you've seen the movie, I hope you know what I'm talking about. Jessica Tandy is strong and has real serious conversations within the context of the horror with Melanie that feel real. They feel like conversations that two people in this situation would have. Yes, we're just trying to survive. But I know that you have feelings for my son, and I'm not sure if I even like you. I mean, you could almost argue that's a little too much reality for a horror film. And an actress who went on to have a pretty significant career, and to me has given very up and down performances, or maybe it's just that her characters aren't written that well, Veronica Cartwright. She plays Mitch's younger sister. It's a little bit of a stretch because Rod Taylor is one of those guys, I think he looked a lot older. He looked a lot older than he really was. She looks more like his daughter than, or could be his daughter as far as age than sister, but we go with it. It's a movie. It's not a big deal. But Veronica Cartwright is, I mean, I would argue that this is her best performance. I like what she does in Alien. You know, she has the very natural, speaking of not telling the actors what you're going to do, Veronica Cartwright in Alien, she's part of the group of actors, including Sigourney and Yaphet Kotto and Tom Skerritt. They didn't know that the chest burster was going to pop out of John Hurt's, that they had a special effect that was about to happen on set. Veronica Cartwright's reaction when she gets sprayed with the blood, that's really her reacting to, what the fuck are you assholes on set doing here? What are you doing? And they kept it in the movie. It's perfect. But I believe this is the best performance of her career. I didn't like her character in The Witches of Eastwick, another, kind of a comedy with horror film elements. Didn't like her character in that film. In fact, that character is so bad, it almost ruins the movie for me. The Birds has that gradual build that you love to see in horror. Even though this is like hiding in plain sight. We know what's coming. We know the birds are going to continue to attack. We don't know why. So this is not, where is the killer going to strike next? Who is the killer? Is it Stu, in Scream? Blackbird's going to attack us next? Hawks? Pigeons? I don't know. Now, Daphne du Maurier's short story leaves a lot out, but what she leaves out is terrifying. And clearly that was intentional. She paints enough in the way of word pictures where we can put the pieces together. If anything, her story is scarier than the movie. Because when you see everything, you don't have to imagine anything. But The Birds is a great horror film. And surprisingly graphic. Where Hitch, again, he wasn't bound. I mean, Quentin Tarantino has talked about this, that Hitchcock was bound by certain things he couldn't do. He would have wanted to make R-rated movies. No doubt about it. He would have wanted Psycho to be more graphic than it was. No doubt. He would have probably wanted to show more in the way of real sex or sex scenes between Cary Grant's Roger Thornhill and Eva Marie Saint's Eve Kendall. But even with the limitations of that. Hitchcock showed a willingness to put characters in mortal peril that you wouldn't expect to see. There are certain things that you just don't really do, especially back then when you were still dealing with the kind of remnants of the production code in the 60s. I don't even know if they were still calling it the production code, but really until the rating system in the late 60s, which that's its own set of problems and controversies for decades, even till today. But Hitchcock pushed the envelope. Showing people children in jeopardy is a very, very difficult issue. It's not a slam dunk that, oh yeah, it's perfectly fine. Because there are times where it does feel exploitive. But in the world of this film, to me, it doesn't feel exploitive. We want Veronica Cartwright's character to survive because she's just a kid. Nobody deserves the terrible fate that might await them because The Birds is coming. Now, this film was a box office hit. It was not as pioneering, groundbreaking, although some of the special effects, some of the process shots hadn't really been done before. As in with Vertigo, Hitchcock invented some camera angles and some tricks with the camera that hadn't been done. That track out, zoom in Vertigo shot, he's the guy who created it. I don't remember who his cinematographer was. Maybe it was actually the cameraman, and Hitchcock just suggested it, and the cameraman figured it out. So that's the thing, like Citizen Kane, we give Orson Welles credit for a lot of stuff, but there are certain camera tricks. The optimization of 1941, 1942, 1943 era cameras, Greg Toland, the cinematographer, it was probably as much him as Orson Welles. But we'll give Hitchcock credit for some of the pioneering shot making in this film. The Birds was not, proportionally speaking, as big a hit as Psycho, where the marketing, it just got everybody in the seats. And then when people saw it, they told their friends, and it was an early example of people not wanting to spoil a movie for other people. Spoiler alert. I'm not going to do it. I'm not going to do it if you haven't seen Psycho. Spoiler alert, I'm not going to spoil it. How's that? You know, one of the great moments, 1993, The Crying Game, there was a movie where don't tell the secret of The Crying Game. Remember, was it Norm Macdonald on Saturday Night Live? It could have been Dennis Miller. Psst, I'm going to tell you the secret to The Crying Game. It's overrated. I don't agree with that. I happen to love The Crying Game. The Birds, though, is a film that, despite the dated elements, it has stood the test of time. It is still a scary movie. And there are images in this film that are indelible and you will not be able to shake from your mind. Just as you could say, the final images of the movie Psycho, Anthony Hopkins, incredible smile, something you will have difficulty shaking. That's not really a spoiler. The Birds, from 1963, directed by Sir Alfred Hitchcock, and starring Tippi Hedren, Rod Taylor, Jessica Tandy, Veronica Cartwright, and Suzanne Pleshette. The 11th entry in our continuing series of Halloween horror. This has been episode 343 of the Confessions of a Not So Dangerous Mind podcast. I'd like to thank you all for spending some of your Sunday evening here with me in New York. If you check out this episode on the YouTube channel, haven't done so already, please click like, subscribe, comment, share, turn on those notifications. Or if you catch this episode on the audio platforms such as Podbean, Spotify, iTunes, or the others in which we're hosted, same general rule applies. Click like, subscribe, share, and turn on those notifications. I'll be back with a new episode real soon. Until then, peace.